too. I ran into this young cat yesterday.
What's up, baby?
You sent me the personal invite. I couldn't.
Thanks. And then if you wouldn't mind clipping that to you.
I'll clip it. Not sure. Let me get my little.
We're gonna get started here in a couple minutes. In the next couple minutes, so we have a new session starting in the next 2 minutes.
That's my team.
Yeah.
Test.
Hello,
Test.
it is nice to meet you. Lauren,
meet you,
Urban
Lauren.
Street Angels.
Oh
So thank you for
my
all your
goodness.
help.
Here we
Always.
are.
I know.
Lauren in the building. I think I owe you an email.
I don't know how you get Eric Lovett, the All-Star, out of the door. Go, Eric. Go. All right, we're ready. Should we get started?
What do I? Is this, am I clipped? Am I clipped?
Yeah.
I have no idea
Check,
where
check,
I am.
check.
These ones aren't on
I'm
yet.
going to think it's the session. Thank you. That's good to know.
duck.
And I'm assuming more people will join us. So one of the lessons I've learned in putting this conference together is we did not put in enough time for just after the session conversations. And so this is really great. I love all of the energy and everything that we're doing, not only here in the conference with the sessions, but the conversations afterwards are sometimes the richest and feed what we need to do next. It's immediate feedback, which is fantastic as well. So also encourage you to use the Hooba app to give feedback as well. That is one thing I've heard a bit is we just need more time to be human afterwards and have those conversations. So welcome. This session is on cultivating and empowering youth leadership. If that's the session you plan to be in, great. If it was the session you didn't, you should stay. This is going to be an amazing session. I have to say, when we were putting together some of the ideas for this conference, the regional task force, and you were just in the session on youth homelessness, we have dedicated a significant amount of our time. I have brought in a federal grant around youth homelessness. We have a community action plan around youth homelessness. And it has been from almost the minute I came to San Diego, and I've been here almost 5 years, one of the very first things I worked on is helping write for the Homeless Youth Demonstration Grant for San Diego as a region. And we received in our community at that time the largest federal grant to address youth homelessness, over $7 million, right?
What's happening? What's happening?
The money and the programming and the conversation was transformational for me, but I think the most important thing that has come out of that has been our relationships that we had built with our young adults that were experiencing homelessness. That funding required that we put together a committee. That funding required that we actually have some very intentional conversations, and we put them at the center of our planning, and that we didn't deviate from that. Right? We were active listeners, and we have really honored that going forward. So as we thought about this conference and tracks around our goals, our population goals, one very much in end youth homelessness, this is probably the one panel that I'm super excited about. And so I'm going to actually sit, and we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to let David and Levi introduce themselves, because I sometimes feel like it's sort of odd to have someone talk about you, give a bio, when, depending on how you feel on the day, I may want to tell you a lot about me, and depending on the day, I may want to just, start somewhere else. And so we're going to have a conversation. We want you to jump in and be a part of the discussion. I think it's really important that we are understanding that we're talking about leadership and empowerment, right? And we're talking about how we honor that and how we do it. So I'm going to stop standing, and I'm going to sit. I'm going to let David do an introduction, and Levi, and then we're going to jump into some questions to spur some conversation, and we're going to see what the vibe is in the room, and that's where we're going to go. We want you to join us in the conversation, so let's get going.
Do a little mic check. I think I might move this a little closer to me. Wow. I see so many people in here who I like actually know, and I love that. And I think we'll all enjoy the conversation. We'll catch a vibe, and I can't wait to kind of hear from you all as well, because as I look around, I see a lot of experts in leadership and cultivating leadership and developing leadership. But without further ado, David Baker. I'm a youth systems director with the YMCA in our Youth and Family Services Department. I oversee a collaborative project that's designed to move young people towards permanent housing called Housing Our Youth. Any Hoy people in here? Can we get some snaps? Okay, we're light in here. I'm a big fan of snaps, y'all. So if we're talking and you want to clap it up, but you don't want to interrupt what's going down, feel free to give us some little snaps. You know what I'm saying? But above, my title and sort of all those official things that come with the role, I'm a person who's from the work, and it's always kind of the top of my mind and my lens to tap into the culture. I look at culture like a software that we all operate on, and if we're all moving on the same accord, then I think we're moving efficiently and in a direction that's going to benefit the young people in the community, et cetera. So that's where I focus a lot of my energy. And I look at this event as a culture moment where you all are tapping in. I'm going to tap into your expertise. We got Levi in the building. That's going to be, let's some snaps for Levi. Check it out. Yeah. So I won't take up too much time. I can't wait to share all the things with y'all, but I'll pass it over to Levi.
Excellent. Can y'all hear me? Is my mic on? Okay. My name is Levi Giafaglione. I am part of Lived Experience Advisors. I also work at NAMI downtown as a housing navigator. But my story started very long ago when I ended up homeless as a result of really trying to come out as LGBT to my family, who is very strictly religious. And that didn't work out too well, so I spent about 6 years on the streets. It was a team of dedicated case managers and outreach workers who knew my name, who I wasn't just a data metric, I wasn't just a clipboard that they had to fill out. They knew my goals, they knew me as a person, and carried me through that process, and I'm just so grateful for it. And so I worked with TAE Residential Transition Age Youth in a residential program for about 2.5 years. Now I'm working at NAMI on 16th Street, right downtown. If there's anybody in the room who hasn't been to East Village yet, that's definitely our ground zero. So swing by there to kind of know what we're talking about. But I was so happy this time last year to have joined Lived Experience Advisors, where in addition to being a housing navigator and being that person who sits with the clients and manages their patients and expectations and builds up their support system with them. In addition to that, I've also had the opportunity now to where I can go advocate as a lived experience person, but also advocate for what I'm literally seeing day by day with my clients. So so I'm really excited about this. Transition age youth is so close to my heart because I was so young when it happened to me. And so really it's there's not much of a secret sauce to it other than I do the stuff for my clients that worked for me. And it's not much more difficult than that. So thank you guys for being here.
Come and share your mic.
Yeah,
Can
here
I
I
just
can.
share your mic?
Absolutely.
Get cozy over
Absolutely. Let me scoot over a little bit.
here. What?
I don't hear it.
You gotta kind of push it, kind of get all up in that thing.
Yeah,
Recorded ones. And then whose is this one? Is this your mic?
I have one too.
Okay.
Are those working?
Yeah.
I didn't get
These, yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
So we have a few mics, so you guys should hear us.
one of the things that I think is so important as you hear from David and Levi is the way they weave in their personal journey with the work that they're doing now. Both are recognized, respected, look-to leaders in this field. So what we want to have a conversation
conversation about is how do we do it? How do we find more? How do we support you? So let's start with how do you get there? What's that space you need? What's that culture you need? You know, what was that space or person or opportunity that started you on this journey? I know that's not a
Jump in.
small one.
Big question, big question. But I love that we're starting with the conversation about space and creating space, right? The interesting thing about creating space is like there are moments where you may have more time to create space, where you meet somebody and you get to know them, and you know, you maybe think of a colleague or you know, someone on your team, etc. And then there are times where we have to create space on the spot, right? Where you meet somebody and you don't have very much time to make them feel safe and heard and understood. And so whenever I think of creating space, I like to think of the diverse humans that space needs to be created for, if that makes sense, right? And diversity takes so many forms. We think of diversity, of course, with what's can be seen on the surface, but there's also neurodiversity, right? Where you may be working with somebody. Oh yeah. Okay, so you know, so you want to switch? We can. And so when we're thinking about, you know, making someone feel safe and comfortable, it's especially essential when we're trying to cultivate leadership. And I think of every single human as a leader of their own existence. Does that make sense? Is that resonating with the? And so even if someone isn't quote unquote leadership or, you know, whatever comes with that, and I'm not a big fan of roles. I don't know if y'all noticed that. I'm a fan of the humans because that's who brings it, right? And so every single time I'm having a conversation with somebody, I consider them a leader of that conversation, a leader of the actions that come from that conversation. A leader. So when it comes to creating this space, I have a no secret sauce. I like the no secret sauce, but I have a little formula, and it's to make that person feel seen, heard, and celebrated. A little something.
Yeah.
Getting a lot of snaps in early, y'all. I don't want the fingers to be tired. But seen, heard, celebrated. I see you and your experience and who you are. I hear you. And sometimes we're listening for the things that are not being said, right? I hear your experience. I hear what you're going through. And then this last part about being celebrated. When we think of celebrations, there's a positive connotation with celebrations, right? But some of the things we work through are so difficult and just tough. And sometimes I celebrate that. The fact that you showed up and that you're here and that maybe even acknowledging that a situation is difficult, that's the celebration, and they know that they're, you know, they're valued. They're valued. And I think that's kind of where I leave it right there, is I just want you to feel valued. So you could be telling me that you're unhappy with services. You could be telling me that you want to break up, and I'll celebrate that. So.
Yeah, so I touched on it a little bit, but like what worked, and it was having those people who met me where I was at. I was, I don't know, did anybody in this room have everything figured out by like, say, 23? All right. But, and so that's something across the board, whether you're homeless or not, right? Like, we think we have things so much more figured out when we're at that age. And so I wasn't like the most simple, easiest person. Like, they didn't come to me, the outreach workers, and say like, do you want help? And I was like, yes, like help me find a job, like anything like that. And I had built up, you know, this resistance to people coming around with the clipboards and asking the traumatizing questions and everything like that. But there was this specific group, they called them the purple people at the time because they wore purple shirts. And which was actually more intimidating when they were like, it's Thursday, the purple people are coming. And so they would always talk to me. They knew I didn't really want to come into the drop-in center, but they knew my name. They knew what I was trying to do, what I wasn't trying to do. And eventually, like at one point I had asked, you know, could I get some shoes? And they were like, yeah, we have your size at the drop-in center. So it's like, so I said, okay, I gotta go to the drop-in center. I started going there for a few months, and it was kind of cool because there was different things you could do. There was art group and all that, but it was just that everybody got to be themselves and do whatever they wanted when they were there. There would be like some of the friends playing guitars over in the corner, somebody doing art. They had therapy and a clinic on site. But there was nobody, as much as I could have taken every single one of those groups or moments, I really was just there to eat and get like fresh underwear and socks. And so they always met me where I was at. And then the other thing that really has always stuck with me is that at one point, like I felt so broken. I felt like I could never work again. Very young again. Like it's like, oh man, you were gonna give up that young. But I was, you know. And I couldn't see any field that I would ever be able to work in again. And what they used to tell me, similar to what you said in creating that space, was, we'll believe in you until you're able to believe in yourself.
You know, you talked about that value and celebrating, right? And we'll give you what you need. When we had kind of we had a pre-session planning, and we could have gone on for 3 hours, but I think one of the sort of underlying parts of the conversation was how important it is for young adults, that transition age youth, and especially as you lean into, as you said, not only being your own leader, but considering leadership in other ways, how important respect is, right? And I mean, not respect, but respect, right? Right. What does that look like? What does it need to look like? I think part of our ability to be human and authentic with people, but what do you need, you know, in that youth space for respect?
So I am of the firm belief, especially with transition age youth, we all kind of have, you know, that narrative like respect is earned, not given. In the case of transitional age youth, you know, we all kind of recognize what happens to youth in foster systems and abusive households as children if they didn't have anybody invested in their overall outcome. And transition aged youth is just that. It's a transition of age. So there are times where you have to like accept that they're not quite grown, and then there are times that you have to absolutely 100% treat them with, even when you know they're wrong, but you like it's your decision and respect it. So also like one of the things with my transition age youth is they don't like being referred to as youth. And that was something like, and even Tay, which doesn't mean a lot to some people, like, you know, my Tay were like, yeah, we'd rather that than youth. And so that was like always a way that I knew that I could show them respect very simply. And then giving respect first, it just makes your job so much easier. So much easier. It's easier on you. Like, so, and then the last thing I'll say on the respect part is that a lot of times they've been spending their entire lives trying to earn respect. And so we shouldn't make them have to earn that respect. We should show them what it feels like so they can respect themselves.
I'm gonna clap for that. Wow.
So I'm just going to encourage you guys to get on in here if you have questions too, right? Like
You have a mic
we
here,
have a
so
mic right
if
there.
you can project inside the microphone, I really appreciate it for your peers.
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback on the respect real quick. Like, respect means, like, I see where you are, even if we don't agree, I respect who you are, you be who you are, I'll be me, we don't have to agree. So, you know, living in homelessness, I started out in my car, and in safe parking programs, we end up experiencing, like, a lot of single dads with kids, and then watching them, and, you know, I know Monarch School was a wonderful facility, but there's a lot of challenge for them, especially as they go through their teenage years, and then of course they're going to advance into Tay Youth. And then living in the shelters, especially here at the convention center during COVID, we had a couple of young women who were like 24, 25 in a mixed population, and watching the challenges being around much older men. And then of course our young women who experience sex trafficking, and I relate, and of course our transgender women that I've lived with and what they experience, and many of them are Tay. So as kind of a peer support, I guess I see myself in that role in my lived experience. How is it, what do you guys recommend to try to keep, of course, meet them where they are, especially, one of our girls who was here in the shelter with me, she's was dating a lot of much older men. A lot of us worry about her. How do we help guide these women, even trying to speak from my own experience with sexual assault, how do we help guide these women and transgender women as well toward you guys? Because we know, as us above Tay age, right, how vulnerable even 25-year-old men and women are to older population in very vulnerable populations. So I'm just looking for advice how to help guide them towards you guys. As you're mentioning, nobody wants to be called youth.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll touch on it a little bit. When it comes to, in terms of guiding them, because typically, like with some of our older populations, they don't need quite as much guidance. And with transition age youth, they do still need quite a bit of it. You have to do it undercover in a way that they don't know that it was not their idea. And then another thing too is there are much harder conversations that need to happen with transition age youth because of sex trafficking, because of fentanyl, right? Also, a lot of them too will be very eager to start their own families because that's something that maybe they never had. And so you can just, kind of work that conversation out with them in a non-judgmental way too. So.
Yeah, great points. I think I love that you mentioned sort of the specific stage of development that youth are in, right? They're still kind of learning how to be the adult that they want to become, maybe unfamiliar with self-sufficiency. There's so much that goes into it. ACEs, any ACEs people in here? Adverse childhood experiences? Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And so that's what we're working with. We're working with the human who is in this phase where they want to come into themselves, but they're also perhaps still adhering to the ideals of society in some ways, right? And so it's this middle ground that you have to find where you're guiding them while also following them in some ways, right? And so it's a delicate dance. And I think it's one that's never really done the right way. But like Levi said, when you sneak it in, I'm gonna sneak it in. You need the shoes? Come through. Let's talk. Let's throw a party, and that's where we talk about some of the skills required to transition into adulthood. And so I think if there were to be any perfect answer, it would be keeping that door open no matter what happens. You know what I mean? They don't show up to the meeting, keep that door open. They don't respond, keep that door open. That's really the only way that we do our thing, especially with folks who are working through some of the more difficult challenges. The challenges, sex trafficking, et cetera. These things are lifelong trauma that sometimes I think of our young people, and I think of them in a metaphysical way, sort of carrying a backpack, right? And as they're walking through life, they come across these stones and pebbles, and sometimes they'll collect them, toss them in the backpack, right? And I think some of y'all might relate. You're walking through life, you come across something that's you're not quite sure what to do with, so you keep it with you. Maybe you're going to sort through it later, and that backpack keeps getting full and fuller and fuller until it's too heavy. So sometimes when I meet somebody, I ask them about that backpack, and I say, how heavy is it? And sometimes they'll say, it's extremely heavy and I need to sit down right now. And I'll say, then we can work later. Let's just sit down. But that's really what it's about, keeping that door open and letting them know that they're safe and they'll be met with compassion. And I love that you mentioned kind of getting someone to possibly go another place, right? I think we develop these relationships with the people we work with where they trust us, and sometimes they only trust us kind of thing. And it's difficult to get them where they may need to go, or where a place that fits with the goals that they set up for themselves, let's just say that. And so there are times where we have to vouch for each other. And for those, I just completed what's called a solidarity journey. And along this journey of, okay, y'all want to talk about that? We can talk. So we traveled from Long Beach, 125 miles, Long Beach to San Isidro. And the entire purpose of that journey was to unite providers, because we saw the issues that we're facing here in San Diego. They got them up in Riverside, they got them up in Orange County, they got them up in LA, and our people are traveling, right? So why not unite and work on the same accord? And so when you talk about that piece of bringing a partner in who may help get us across the finish line, it's such a valuable part of the work that can go really right or really wrong, you know what I mean? And so one of the messages that we carried along the journey was being locked in. How many folks are familiar with what it means to be locked in? Do me a favor, y'all, throw up a peace sign. If you got fingers, throw up a peace sign for me. Peace sign, peace sign. And then go ahead and cross that middle finger behind that index. For some people, it means hopeful. For some people, it kind of looks like a root, like you're rooted, right? But for everybody in here, it means you're locked in. And what that means is when you call me, I'm going to answer the phone for the human. So you might call me, and I think some of the folks in here, Lauren knows for sure. You call me and you're like, hey, I got a difficult problem that I'm working through. I'm going to insert myself into that in a way where it works best for the human. And so keeping that human top of mind. Yeah, let's clap it up for the human. Clap it up for the human.
I have a quick statement. David mentioned diversity earlier, and then Levi mentioned that they don't like to be called youth. And this is coming from a wise old man now. I used to live in Italy and spoke Italian and worked in the Paralympics. Ironically, the Italian word for handicap translates diversity able. And I think that would be a very powerful name for them to take on, because they truly are. So diversity able. And here's Matt.
I like that.
My name is Matthew. I'm with Levi and John Brady and Lived Experience Advisors. I also went through HEAL, and I do volunteer work at a food bank on Fridays. So I have an answer for Levi. Yes, at age 20, I did know everything. And then at age 25, I met a woman who I married, and I learned very, very quickly, I knew shit. Oh, sorry, I'm having a brain fart. David, I like locked in, but I have a better sense of laser focus. And finally, Tamera, quick question. And Sandy knows her. There is a woman who is in permanent housing. The conditions are deplorable, but I can't find anybody to move her from permanent housing to a better permanent housing. What can she do?
So, how about let's have that conversation, I
Yes,
think,
yes,
after, just
okay.
because that would take up a lot
Right.
to walk through it, but I don't want to lose what you're asking, so we'll follow up on that. I do want to bring us kind of back to how important it is to have youth leaders in this space, right? When we're talking about I mean, to be honest, like I knew everything at 16. Right? I knew everything when I was 20. I now know nothing at my age, right? And I also don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So that's okay too. But I think that the importance of the people that I actually listened to at 16 or the people that I listened to in my early 20s are very different than a lot of the staff that we see in organizations. And I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. So I'm just saying the people that I related to, that I needed as peers and kind of leaders, were that trusted group. So one of the things I think that is so important that we learned in this space is how important it is to employ, support, lift up, provide opportunities, should they want them, of leadership in different ways, so that people have those peers, they have the people who understand their journey, right, that they're
and how important those boundaries are and that level of respect. But we need more young leaders, and that means as a little bit more experienced leader, who does her roots, so
Are you coming for me?
yeah, I'm, you know. But how important it is to hear what our youth are saying, right? What our young adults are saying. David Baker is on my nonprofit board. Critical and important, right? I don't think I was invited on a nonprofit board until I was in my mid-40s. And I will say I thought I could have contributed something before that, right? So how do we find that, and is on us, that we learn from them and can share opportunities with them, right? Share that space.
Tamera, that's actually exactly my question. I'd love to add to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you all for being here. I love y'all. A couple of us were just in the BIPOC leadership group, and one thing that I really took away from that was naming the things that are going on. So I think when we name the white cultural norm of leadership having to do with length of time serving or titles or education, that's one of the main barriers to our youth leaders. I think, I wouldn't say we don't have youth leaders, we do, we just haven't given them the power to be the leaders that they are. So how do we hand over that power, really turn that on its head, right? If we're looking at length of time serving in this field or accolades or degrees, how do we flip that and really start placing the value on our youth leaders that already exist in this community?
All right, what do you think? How do
All
we
right,
do it?
I'll go. So I want to say two things. Part of it about what Tamera said, being lived experience. Do you guys think that, like, when I'm sitting down with a client, I tell them, like, I know what you're going through? Never. I do have a little, I do have a little sign that's just a little bio about me in my office, and it says I have CPTSD. I was homeless for 6 years, and I think it says I love skateboarding. And so they can just kind of see that while they're sitting there, and then they'll look at it and read it, and then like 100% of the time, they will go, well, I know you know, because you went through it too. Now, again, they don't know my exact experience, but they know that I felt something similar enough to theirs that they can open up to me. And then so when it talks to raising and just really like growing those good leaders, I'll see a lot with Tay where they'll say, one day I want to do what you're doing, but I know I've got to get, there's, this idea, you got to get 2 years stable. It's, it's a good idea, but also there's no reason for them to not start that journey now. And so NAMI has a peer support training that happens. It's about 10 weeks, twice a week. Even for clients who you may know, like they need to get in touch with their mental health a little bit, right? But they don't think that they do. You could put them in something like a peer support training class, and they're not like, they're gonna subconsciously like learn more about themselves while they're in it, but also learn how to advocate for themselves, how to help others through that process. And so we can raise those people up right now. So if there are any clients who are like, oh yeah, I wanna do this, don't go, oh no, you don't, it's super hard. Oh, you just get yelled at all the time. Oh, 911 doesn't come when you call. Like, don't do any of that. Like, just support them in that. So, yeah.
Powerful, powerful. When we think about, I love how you framed up the question, Tamera, because I think I can reflect on a lot of the times where I was a young leader in a space that I wasn't quite ready for. Does that make sense, y'all? You're put in these positions where you're making these decisions that may impact other things, and people are asking you about your lived experience and what you would do differently and all these things, and it can be a whirlwind. It can be a lot happening at once. So I think what's crucial when we're thinking of young leaders or people that are growing in the work is setting them up for success. And that means a lot, that requires a lot of different things. It requires a living wage, right? Little snappies. It requires policy that allows them to break into these spaces. I call policy frozen power, because a policy comes out and it's just like, it's the policy. I don't know who made it up, but we gotta. And so when we're thinking about bringing people with lived experience into the space, breaking down some of those policies around education and advocating to the powers that be that these things are the right thing to do. And another thing I like to touch on, especially when we're talking about like lived experience and the work, to me, something I've been saying lately, the work isn't always belonging to the person with lived experience, if that makes sense. So if you're I think we all have lived experience, right? I think we're going through life and we're experiencing things. And so I would encourage you all and the people around you to not only represent your existence, but if you do have that reach where you can advocate for someone with lived experience, or just the idea of increasing representation. And when I say representation, I mean putting people in positions of power that look like the people that are being served, if that makes sense. Okay, good. I was hoping I'd get some snaps there. I think we understand what that means. And so cultivating that representation is more than just checking a box, though, right? Because we got to talk about checking that box. We got to talk about getting that experience from somebody who's been in the work and then throwing that in a grant, and then all of a sudden truly cultivating a leader requires so much intention, and that's why I love Tamera. I love Tamera, y'all. Put some snaps for Tamera. Oh, yeah, claps. Clap it. Clap it. And I'll use Tamera as an example, but I could use so many people who are in this room right now, and I could shout y'all out by name. I would take the whole hour if I see, we got Beatty, we got Kristen, we got Jason, we got, no, I'm just kidding. But what Tamera did for me was she saw something that maybe I didn't see. I never, as a young person who just sort of was navigating out of homelessness, I didn't know that I'd have an opportunity to become a board member. I thought that was reserved for people who were CEOs and, had this way about them. I'm kind of a little bit urban, I think that's the word. And so Tamera helped people who may not understand urban understand that they need to make room for urban, and used her influence to say, hey, y'all, he's got something to say. Maybe not right now, because he's doing his thing, but eventually there may be something there, right? And I think there's so much value in that. Like, I think, Levi, did you say it earlier, helping them see something that they may not see yet?
Yeah. Believing in you until you believe in yourself.
Believing it. Also, y'all, I would love to I'm a big fan of like face tattoos, but I want to do like positive affirmations. I think I'll get that one. Believe in yourself on the forehead. Flip the stigma.
I'm getting a housing first tattoo so we can just go together.
Housing first, both here. So yeah, y'all, I mean, it's not easy. I think that's one thing that I'll say for sure. And it comes with so many steps and so many different people. And I think a lot of people say change comes from within. And I think that's the way to do it, is understanding that you are the seed that can be planted, that will grow into the platform that somebody with lived experience can launch off of. Can I get some snaps, y'all? But great question. Thank you so much for it.
Levi, did you want to add anything?
Done?
I obviously adore Levi. We work together a lot. We work on the same street, and we are grateful every time he comes by with the Narcan that I'm trying to scream out for. Yeah, and then one time he brought us flowers after we did CPR on someone and sent him off to the hospital. He was out by in Roseville. So thank you. We are deeply grateful for that connection with Tommy and you. And David, I've never heard you or met you, and I need to replicate you somehow. Is it like a
Could you imagine if we had?
You have to grow your own.
My staff is amazing too, so no comparison. You guys are better.
Let's hear it for Downtown Partnership.
They are amazing. I would love a couple things. One is it would be really cool to see more young adults, maybe like peer support or internship outreach on the streets, and we could could team them up with some of the outreach staff that are professional. I would love to see that. I've always worked with youth in one way or another. I mentor a couple of youth on the side who are struggling with staying housed in their parents' house in an abusive situation, and struggling with their own mental health and neurodivergence, which brings me to my second platform please, since Tamera, you're here. I would really like to see more neurodivergent, ADHD, autism spectrum testing. It's a 2-year wait if you aren't in school. And most of the kids that drop out of school, at least half of them are neurodivergent, probably more. 30% of the people incarcerated over juvenile age are neurodivergent, but 70% going in that are juvenile are neurodivergent. So we have been missing for years and years and years. The incarcerated and unhoused population has neurodivergent thinking styles, and we are not doing enough about it. So I would love to keep this conversation going. How can we provide more support for that, and then connect on internships or volunteers or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I just fully agree, period. Yeah, some of my most favorite clients struggle with that. So, and it was, I saw how difficult it was for them to get help because sometimes there's this thing with neurodivergence where it's like, oh, well, that's a developmental disability, and we do mental health. So that's, we've definitely got to, we got to fix that. So I'll add it to the list.
I'd just add one piece, I think, responsibility from my role is when you're working with any emerging leader, right? If they share an interest, you also have to invest more than just pay, right? And it can't be just, well, you fit that box and I want you on this committee or this board, or, right? We need to surround them with the knowledge that they may seek. And I think it's important that we frame it that way, because I think too often it's like, well, you need X. Yeah. You need this training, you need this knowledge, and I think what we want to be able to do is make it available to the things that they're seeking, right? And allow them the choice. Secondly, as leaders, we need to dedicate time to develop relationships with them. And I think sometimes we use things like mentorships or coaching, but sometimes those feel too transactional or sound too transactional. I feel very accountable that if someone is saying, hey, I want to consider this, and I leadership or those kind of things, and both know this, if I'm invested in you, I'm all in, right? We have lunch, I return your texts, I'll open the doors, I make introductions, my network is yours, that piece is what is needed, right? Because I can hire you, give you a title, pay something, right? But if I don't surround you with and unfortunately someone believed in me when I thought, oh, I knew everything about that. I interviewed for a job and I get that job, and then I was like, I don't know anything about this job. And that I had people who gave me that opportunity to grow into it, right? I knew I could do it, but I also needed opportunity to have the tools and have the learning, and it doesn't have to just be a degree or a piece of paper. Because a lot of those things are really important, but they actually are what helps us in this space. And sometimes life experience and those kind of things are more valuable as well. So I just want to all of our leaders who are also supporting emerging leaders, whatever age and stage they're at, but especially if we're going to reduce the number of young adults on the streets, we need people like them that they trust that can develop those relationships, right? But that means an additional level of investment personally in people. That is, for me, I get so much more out of it. Right? I mean, selfishly, I get so much out of it because I learn so much, and I am still in a learning stage.
and believe it or not, still a growing stage, probably not taller, but growing. So how do you seek that out? How do you find those kind of people? What is it that attracts our young, and many times vulnerable in a lot of ways, but not vulnerable like we talk about, that you can let your guard down and connect with someone in that space, right? What is that, what are you looking for? It's almost, I'll tell you that the sense that you think you know everything, but you don't, right? You get a little bit older, but one of the things that I think, especially if you've had any traumatic experience, you're incredibly attuned to another person that seems to have that experience.
Yep.
Right? So how do you recognize it?
Yeah. So I want to use the example of, like, growth can happen at any time, and it's also like not a, you don't ever have to stop growing. You can like every day just decide to grow on something new. So a few years ago, I started listening to the Homeless in San Diego podcast, and I was like, I want to be on this podcast, but I don't feel like I've done enough yet, so I'm gonna go do more, and then I'll come try to be on this podcast. And so speaking of those opportunities, I mean, I had been working in homeless services and with the refugees for almost 3 years at that point. But in the funny thing, you know, about Greg interviewing me, you know, you're getting personal. And it was that space that was like creating the opportunity for us to have, you know, a shared conversation. But then not only that, so when I was on that podcast, I've just been thinking about this a lot. And so Greg introduced me to John Brady with Lived Experience Advisors, which has given me the whole advocate piece that I've wanted to do. And then John has introduced me to so many people, but probably most importantly, Tamera. And I do feel that support, and that's, I mean, yeah. So just thank you, Greg. Thank you, Tamera. Thank you, John. Because you guys are doing it already, so.
Yeah, it is.
Time for one question?
First, I just want to say thank you to you both. I'm lucky enough to get to work with David, and I had a chance to talk with Levi yesterday, and I just feel so lucky to work alongside so many amazing people, and I learned so much. But one of the things that I wanted to ask is, you know, I would like to have more people with lived experiences in all positions, not just peer support positions. And I have a difficult time finding people. What platforms would you recommend?
Okay, can I go? Sorry.
Where's the QR code?
Yes, my QR code's over there if you guys want to follow me. Just scan that QR code. It'll go to my link in bio. It'll take you to my website and also my GoFundMe. I like, one of the things that was interesting that happened was I knew how to do social media super well, and then when I ended up homeless, I didn't always have a charged phone, yada yada, so I kind of forgotten about it. So I sort of entered back into social media feeling like an old man already because it had changed so much. But I did decide to make a TikTok early last year, and immediately what I found was, like, especially transitional age youth, social media is such a way for them to reach out for you. Just even like, you know, like, you don't even have to put out posts like, are you homeless or whatever, like, they will find you. There was a death and a fire on 16th Street one day, and this girl immediately commented, and she said, we're homeless up the street from there. Oh my God, what happened? It's not safe out here. And I immediately was like, you know, have you done your VI spread? No, well, I need an ID. Can you help? Yeah, let's start with the ID, you know, so, yeah, social media.
Social media, that's where it's at. Oh, we got a question there. God.
Love social media, by the way. I found a lot of us through social media. I think we also have to put in place some type of, I don't even know how to put it, some type of letter, some type of something, giving the youth the ability to go out here and speak and not be videotaped without, you know, your consent. I see a lot of photos not being blurred out, and it is youth. A a lot of women per se that I see on social media that I look and I go from the women to the organization to this, and I keep going. So I'm not alone. There's thousands of people that do it. But maybe if we can implement something for social media, you know, stating that in a homeless population we can't take pictures, or, you know, your privacy act isn't taken away. Because I run into, being an outreach, I run into a lot that I don't know is young because they age so quick. You know, we look a lot older, you know. Our bodies are shaped different, women, you know, very young. And I would say, just being in the ICWA foster care myself, at my younger years, they pushed emancipation. Was I ready? No. But that was a really big ordeal, you know, in the 90s. And with that being said, we didn't have a voice because we were considered grown at 17 because we had a job. You know, that was really big back then. And I was just a number today because I'm learning so much today that I wish we had 20 years ago. I'm like, what? This is happening, this is accepted. But for the most part, as being a youth, I think those two things are very important, that we do know that we are youth by age. The numbers have changed. Yeah, 26 is a big number, you know, going to school and being responsible for my taxes. But 16 is even younger. And if we can get something implemented, or maybe we can figure out how we can, you know, tell our outreach or get our organizations to understand that we need some type of consent given away for pictures and talking, and or maybe some question on there, how old are you, you know, or will you allow me to talk to you in this way, or so forth. But I can go on and on.
Right.
Yeah.
That's something too, not even exclusive to social media. It really bothers me sometimes when I can't find a client, but the news keeps using the same media stock footage over and over and over. And yeah, it'll be a youth, and I've seen, you know, very, very vulnerable people that end up in the media. So, yeah.
So I'm just going to say for you to get a seat at lunch. We're going to wrap it up and say thank you to David and Levi. Thank you guys.
I want to say one more thing. Can you guys repeat after me? I know I can. Be what I want to be. If I work hard at it, I'll be where I want to be.
I didn't expect this. No, it's all day.